Just turn it.
There you go.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Candace Campbell-Jackson. I'm the Senior Vice President here at Syracuse University, and I'm Chief of Staff to the Chancellor. I am a native of Key West, Florida, so I tell people don't complain to me about weather. I love Onondaga County and Syracuse. We begin our programs here at Syracuse by acknowledging our partnership with the Haudenosaunee neighbors. We have a land acknowledgement. Allow me to share it with you. We acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, fire keepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral land Syracuse University now stands. I want to bring greetings on behalf of our Chancellor, Kent Siverud, and our Vice Chancellor, Mike Haney. They are both traveling, kind of warmer spots, but they wanted to make sure that we welcomed you, that we told you just how honored Syracuse University is to be a partner with the County of Onondaga and the City of Syracuse, and so many of you here, and we're looking forward to an engaging and enriching discussion this evening. So again, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Good evening. Good to see you all. Kind of lights in my eyes. It is amazing to see you all here. We're kind of wondering with the weather, but we are the Cuse, and snow does not stop us. So we are here for an amazing night to hear some information from a trailblazer in community development. Had the pleasure of meeting him yesterday as well, so I'm looking forward to his presentation. We want to thank Syracuse University, Onondaga County, CZB, who is the consultant working with the city and the county on our housing strategy as we move forward in our community. I ran into some friendly faces and some faces all day as we came in today, and it's been a long week, but it's been a great week. Each day of this week, in the evening, we were in a session to talk about the future of this community. I don't know about you, but I don't have time for naysayers anymore. We are ready to move forward. We are ready to energize our community, and we are ready to do it in an equitable way. And we all have made a commitment to doing that, and we know we can make it happen. We've been working on things already on the way, and so today is amazing opportunity for Alan Mallach to come. He is a pioneer lecturer around the world. We have him here. He's world respected. Some of my colleagues said they have an academic crush on him because he's just the man when it comes to this topic. So I am just eager. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Community Progress and advisor to CZB, our consultant. He's a writer, a lecturer. Tonight, we will receive a presentation from Alan, and then we will have a panel discussion with Onondaga County Executive Ryan McMahon, our mayor of the City of Syracuse, my boss and colleague Ben Walsh, Professor Leonard Lopo of the Maxwell School of Citizenship, and if time permits, and I'm going to try to make time permit, we'll allow for a brief Q&A at the end. But I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. So I will ask you all to give a warm Syracuse Onondaga County welcome to Alan Mallach.
Thank you, and good evening, or good afternoon, I'm not sure which it is. Before I start talking serious, I want to mention just a little bit about my connection to this area, which is actually indirect, but I think it's in a way an interesting American story. I'm the son of immigrants who came to the United States, but the young woman I married, I discovered her family is from Onondaga County. And in fact, her great, I don't know how many far back ancestor was an early settler who came to this county in 1803. He was a Revolutionary War veteran and got some land and until my father-in-law graduated from Syracuse University and decided to move to New York City. Never looked back. But so I feel like in a distant way I'm connected to Onondaga County. And then, of course, my son married a young woman who grew up in Lafayette, and they ended up living, and they live today, and I'm going to spend a weekend with them in Oneonta. So I'm not from the area, but somehow I feel connected to this part of the world, and I think it happens to be a wonderful part of the world, which people outside upstate New York often don't fully appreciate. But that doesn't mean it's had an easy time of it, and it doesn't mean it's going to have an easy time of it in the future. But the question is not what's going to happen, but what we and you are going to do about it. So what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes are three things, basically. First, a couple of points about what's going on in the world that's likely to affect the future of Syracuse and Onondaga County. Second, kind of a quick overview of some of the realities that have to be grappled with today. And then finally, and I think most important, some thoughts about what to do about it. So I think we often tend to get so caught up in our worlds, we don't step back and look at the big things that are affecting our lives and the lives of our communities. But there's some important things happening and some big changes. One of the things that I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate yet is the way population growth is slowing down. Now, we know that population growth has slowed down in upstate New York. That's a long-term thing. But now it's becoming the entire country. This graph, which I made over on the one on the left, shows without immigration, the United States will go into negative population growth in probably 10 years or less. If we continue with immigration at the same rate we've had for the last couple of decades, we'll go into negative population growth, but not for another 10 to 15 years after that. So what this means is when we start talking about growth and economic development and the future of a city, that the strategy that most cities and most counties have used for the last few decades, which is how do we get back on the growth train, is going to be less and less relevant because the growth train isn't stopping here anymore. The other thing is we're becoming an older country. I mean, we're not quite where Japan is, where almost 1 out of every 3 people is, like me, over 65. But we're moving in that direction. And in the future, what population growth we do have is going to be mostly in older people. And that's going to change things. And we're already seeing this in Syracuse and Onondaga County, where people over 65 are by far the fastest growing segment of the population in both the city and the county. Another thing, we've been accustomed for the last 40 years to being part of a global economy, getting stuff from all over, sending stuff to all over. That's changing. Now, I'm not suggesting there's going to be this huge crash anytime soon. No. Things are going to be gradual, things are going to be incremental. We'll hardly notice from one year to the next. But between the increasing conflict in the world, the disruption from climate, supply chain disruptions, we all know about that, and increasing protectionism, and ironically, Micron is part of that. Micron is a symbol of deglobalization, and the fact that the United States is now spending billions of dollars to localize economies that would ordinarily have become part of the global system. This is going to change everything. It's going to be gradual, it's going to be slow, but the economic model that we've been used to for the last couple of generations is changing. There are 2 other huge wild cards. One is climate change, and this area is undoubtedly going to be less impacted by climate change in some areas, like the Southwest, like California and so forth, but it's going to be impacted, and our world is going to be impacted. And of course, the other one, which I haven't a clue to how it's going to affect our lives. All I know is it's going to, which is technological change, the growth of AI, robotics, and so forth. Again, these are wild cards. We don't know how they're going to affect our world, but they are going to affect our world. So in this environment, this is going to create a difficult world for the future. And cities, counties, regions are going to have to cope with it. My feeling is that it's going to be harder for what you might call peripheral regions, as distinct from the New York, LA, London, Tokyo places, to respond to this. Because when there's less to go around, what tends to happen is the ones that have the most already tend to hoard what they have. And that means that everybody else is fighting over, or let's say competing for, less. And that's the challenge. It's going to be a very competitive world going forward, especially for smaller cities and regions outside of the major metropolitan centers of the world. So, with that in mind, let's look briefly at Syracuse and Onondaga County. Okay. The first thing we know is the county's population growth is relatively flat. The county outside Syracuse has been growing for the last couple of decades. Syracuse has been losing population for many decades, even though it's stabilized recently. We also know that what's happening is there are more and more older people and fewer children, as well as, for reasons that I don't fully understand, the county has lost a huge number of people in the 45 to 54-year-old range. So this is changing the county, even if the population continues to grow, although slowly, or if it doesn't, and it's not clear which is going to happen. It's going to be a very different population than it was. Fewer children, more older people. It's going to require rethinking. In the city, which has stabilized after decades of population decline, see a lot of the same things. The number of children is dropping dramatically. The number of older people is rising. There is an increase in young adults, which is dominated by two groups: immigrants and a group, what I call them young grads, basically young people with college degrees, many of them graduates of Syracuse University who stick around for a while, but who, again, as you can see, as they get older, as they start to raise families, tend to leave. So, again, Syracuse is looking at a very different demographic than they were looking at not all that long ago. Turning to jobs, it's a very interesting thing. Syracuse is the job center for the county. It has a significantly larger share of jobs, of the county's jobs, than it does of the county's population. But what's interesting is over 3/4, almost 80% of the jobs in Syracuse are held by people who live outside the city of Syracuse. Most people who live in Syracuse and work outside the city in the county. And by and large, it is the better paid jobs, the higher skilled jobs and so forth that are held by commuters. And what's even more worrisome is the number of Syracuse residents working in the city has been going down steadily since over the last 20 years. It's declined by a third, over 10,000, nearly 10,000 people. And that's a real challenge for the city of Syracuse. Another thing that's interesting and very significant, Syracuse of all of the cities I've looked at in recent years, Syracuse is one of the most dependent on what are known as eds and meds. Between Syracuse University, Upstate Medical, and a host of smaller institutions and so forth, this economy is very dependent on those institutions. And on the one hand, that's a good thing. It's a lot better than I think of a city like Peoria, where the economy is totally dependent on a cluster of Caterpillar factories. Now, that's actually pretty good for the moment, but the thing about that dependency is if Caterpillar decides tomorrow that it can make those great big man toys somewhere else for a little less, they're going to do so. They're going to announce, we're going to Mexico, and there's not a damn thing Peoria can do about it. At least Syracuse University isn't going anywhere. Upstate Medical Center isn't going anywhere. But the number of people reaching college age, who are going to be reaching college age, in about 5 years, what is known as an age cohort, which is the number of people of a given age group, 60. In about 5 years, the number of people in the United States who are going into college age, 17, 18, is going to start dropping dramatically. In about 20 years, it's going to be the average number of people who are likely to be going into college in a given year is going to be 25% less than it is today. So all over this country, we're already seeing universities closing, colleges closing. Now, Syracuse is doing quite well for the time being, but in the long run, who knows? In the long run, there are no long-term certainties about anything. So, continuing. So the employment picture is a lot of question marks in it, but for the moment, it's pretty good. But now, the other thing that is really striking now we know all over the United States, you have big disparities between center cities and their surrounding suburbs. It's the reality of American life. We are a country of vast inequality, spatially, geographically, economically, and racially. We know that. But it's amazing how powerful that is, and how powerful that is here in Syracuse and Onondaga County. I'll just run through quickly a few slides. This is household income. Huge disparity. The average Syracusan earns only a little more than half of what the average person who lives in the rest of the county earns. And the gap is between, even within the city of Syracuse, the gap economically between white and black is huge and growing. Poverty is concentrated in Syracuse. There's very little, now there are poor people in the county, all over the county. The county is, despite, it may be rich relative to Syracuse, but in national terms, Onondaga County is not a wealthy county. It's a very middle-income county, and it has poor people. But it does not have the concentrated poverty that Syracuse has, which is a problem of its own. Syracuse is a racially diverse city. Substantial black community, substantial Latino community, along with a white community. Again, the county is overwhelmingly white. And then home ownership. Syracuse is a city predominantly of renters. The rest of the county is a county of homeowners. And in fact, to sum this up, just we'll spend a moment. I'm not going to read it out loud. Just look at those numbers. It gives an idea of the extraordinary disparity in terms of income and race and living condition between the city of Syracuse and the rest of the county. And that is a critical part of the challenge for the future. And so because Syracuse and Onondaga County are in the position where to thrive in the future, they're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time. Walk in the sense of focus on prosperity and economic strength and fiscal strength and so forth, and to chew gum in the sense of how to overcome the massive inequities that are part of the reality that we all share. So, with this in mind, what to do? Okay, first, there are a couple of obvious points. And I'm going to mention these even though I suspect that every single person in this room already basically knows this, but I think it's worth setting the stage. Obviously, the county and the city have to focus on a stronger economy and a job base. Equally obviously, they have to focus on a strong fiscal base. If the city and the county don't have enough revenues to provide a high quality of services and a high quality of life, eventually everything else will fall apart. They have to develop a way to address the inequities that are currently part of the reality. And these are the spatial inequities, the economic inequities, and the lack of opportunity for low-income people and for the communities of color, particularly in the city of Syracuse. And at the same time, especially in the city, but not exclusively, build a stronger housing market for an economically diverse population, but also one that reflects the changes in the demography of the city and the county. The fact that this is going to be increasingly a region of adults, fewer children, more elderly, single people and couples, but also, hopefully, more young adults, starting as single people and couples, but eventually, hopefully, staying in the region to raise their families. So these are the obvious issues. These are the issues I don't even really need to talk about. But there's a bigger question. And this goes to the heart of where a city like Syracuse fits into the future global reality. In a world where there's less population growth, less economic growth, less globalization and so forth, how does a small city not just survive, but hopefully thrive? And I think the key issue is there's going to be increasing competition for what is going to be a smaller pie. And the cities that figure that out and figure out how to compete successfully and how to build success around that reality are going to be the ones that will thrive. And something that's important, in the United States, we have always felt that growth was not just a good thing, but a necessary thing. That how could you survive if you don't grow? It's like they say that a shark dies unless it can keep moving. I have no idea if that's true, by the way, but it sounds plausible, and I've heard it from reliable people. Well, we feel something now, not to draw any parallels with the United States, but we have something similar in our minds about if you can't grow, you die. Well, we may have to start rethinking that, saying, what is so essential about having the population get larger and larger and larger every year. Is that necessary? You know, Japan has been losing population as a country for now 15 years. Almost every town, village, and city in Japan is losing population. And what they're discovering, now I'm not going to suggest that Japan is happy about that, which they're not. But what they are starting to realize, especially at the local level, that the solution is not to fight against that necessarily, but to figure out how to manage it successfully. And I think we should start thinking in those terms, because reality will be upon us before we realize it. And I think it means a bunch of things. And I'm going to run. First, we have to focus on the quality of life. And in fact, this is a place where I think in many respects, Syracuse and Onondaga County are in a good position already, except maybe for the weather. But there are people, I think, who are not totally afraid of snow. But if we put that aside, this area already has quite a high quality of life. It's a beautiful area. Syracuse has gorgeous neighborhoods, a vital downtown, strong university. But building on that, and Mac is critically important, because what people are going to be looking for is quality of life, and secondly, opportunity. And in that light, I think one of the critical things is to maximize the local human capital and really focus on providing the best educational system and the best workforce development system in terms of enabling people to reach their potential that a community is capable of providing. This is going to be one of the critical things. Can you build local human capital along with the quality of life and the opportunity, and make this place attractive for where people who are graduating from the university will want to stay and live and work and open businesses and start new high-tech ventures in Syracuse and Onondaga County, and increasingly build a locally oriented economic base. One thing I was speculating about this morning, I wonder how much of the millions and millions of dollars of stuff that the university and upstate procure each year, everything from paper clips to sophisticated machinery, actually comes from Syracuse and Onondaga County. I would guess it's very little. And it would be interesting to see if there's a way, if the city and the county and the university and upstate ever got together and said, can we increase this? What would it take to significantly increase the extent to which the investments by the university, these multi-billion-dollar institutions, stay in the region and reinforce and leverage more capital and more human capital in the region instead of going elsewhere? But an interesting project. And I think, especially, I'm not going to get into this in detail. I am a huge fan of what is known as, sometimes called local manufacturing, distributed manufacturing, decentralized manufacturing. The technologies that have emerged in the last couple of decades to create local manufacturing systems are quite unbelievable. And so I think looking at how this region can use the technologies that are emerging to increasingly build a locally oriented economy is something I think is worth doing. And then finally, take advantage of opportunities, but never lose sight of the larger goals of building a thriving city and addressing the inequities. And in this light, I think the redesign of I-81 and even more Micron are very important, but they're opportunities, not game changers. What I mean by that is they're amazing opportunities for the city and the county, but they can't become the only focus. They have to be part of a larger picture with the larger focus on the quality of life and human capital and so forth. Because Micron is important, but there are a lot of question marks. I mean, I'm a bit of a skeptic about things. Somebody tells me we're gonna ramp up in increments over 20 years. And I say, 20 years is a long time. Awful lot can happen in 20 years in terms of technology, in terms of the economy, in terms of everything else. So I would never put too many of my eggs in a 20-year basket. The second thing is be careful about multiplier studies. Sometimes the results are less than some of the studies project. And then the other thing, of course, we know the map over here is a rough picture of the area that lies within a 1-hour commute or less of the new factory. Awful lot of people live in that area. And so I'm guessing that what you might call the incremental housing demand resulting from the factory is going to be a good deal less than the total employment. And a lot of the demand, especially in the first few years, and this is something that is an opportunity, but it's also a challenge, is going to be from construction workers who are going to come. Now, most of the construction workforce is going to be recruited from all over the United States. They're a specialized, high-wage, highly mobile population who will be coming in, depending on the nature of the job, for anything from, say, 6 months to maybe 2 to 3 years. And then they'll be leaving. But they'll need a place to live. But it's not the same as a family moving in for a permanent job who's going to need a place to live. So we have to think about these. Again, these are great opportunities, but they have to be seen in context. So same is true with I-81. And this is going to be, I think it's exciting. I mean, getting rid of that viaduct, personally, I think it's a wonderful thing. But making sure that the city and the region truly benefit from getting rid of that viaduct is going to be incredibly difficult. It's going to be tremendously challenging. This isn't, now in San Francisco, when they got rid of the Embarcadero Freeway and turned that into a boulevard, new office buildings, restaurants, apartment buildings, et cetera, sprouted like flowers in the desert and after the spring rains. But that's because San Francisco has still has, an incredibly strong market, an incredibly strong demand, and billions of dollars available in investment. It's not going to be that easy here to make the right kind of growth come in on the heels of I-81. So it's going to take a huge amount of work and a huge amount of cooperation from everybody involved, because one key thing about it is how to use I-81 both to reconnect the community and overcome inequities, and to help build a stronger market, a stronger economy, stronger fiscal base for the city. And that's, again, it's going to require an awful lot of cooperation, an awful lot of resources, and an awful lot of hard work, but it can be done. So, to wrap up, 4 points. First, some of these are pretty obvious. Be realistic and grounded. Recognize that the world is changing and change with it. Don't try to fight it. The world is a lot bigger than you. It's just like if you're in a little car and a great big truck wants to move into your lane, you let it. You don't try to fight it. Second, simultaneously focus on building stronger markets, attracting talent, and fighting inequities. I think a lot of people feel these two are incompatible with each other. They're not, but you can't let them turn into that. Third, however you take advantage of opportunities, don't lose track of the fact that building change is a slow process that has to be stuck with for years and years before it matures. If you let the opportunities turn you in the wrong direction, it's hard to get back. And then finally, everybody needs partners to make this happen. One of the things, and I've spent many years in local government, I learned mayors, county executives cannot make change happen by themselves. They can try to lead change, but they cannot make it happen. In fact, there's nobody, there's no one person or one group in Syracuse or Onondaga who can make change happen. Because ultimately, the only way change happens is if all of the people who have to be part of that change basically are on the same page and agree that change is necessary and that they are going to work for change. And building that partnership, not just between the city and the county, but between the city, the county, the universities, the medical centers, the corporations, the other institutions, everybody, the community organizations, the CDCs, that is a critical process. Without that partnership, none of the things I'm talking about, none of the things that I think Syracuse and Onondaga County have in their vision of tomorrow are likely to happen. But with that partnership, with everybody on the same page, nothing can stop you. Thank you.
So we are going to transition to the panel, give all of our panelists an opportunity to settle, make sure their mics are on, all that good technical stuff. Alan, thank you very much can we give Alan another hand, please? So Alan, I was very much reassured by much of what you said, because we have been having conversations in large rooms, small rooms, and everything in between about the very challenges that you spoke of in your presentation around housing, around economic development, around workforce equity, around poverty and income disparities. And so we are very, very much so sober about the challenges we have, but very optimistic at the same time about how we can address them while we seek moving ahead in prosperity. So my first question I'm going to pose to the mayor and the county executive first, and then include everyone else. But I think one thing that we can all agree upon is we are in an era of great collaboration in multiple levels of government. And so what tangible projects has the city and the county been working on, and what do you see given the potential opportunities we have moving forward of additional collaborative opportunities for our economic future?
I'll start with that. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. Alan, thank you. I personally have crossed paths with Alan many times over the years. Although this is probably the first time I ever shared the stage. I was usually out there in awe of his work. And as I sat there, I was certainly in awe. And, you know, Alan, you described yourself as a bit of a skeptic, and I appreciate that and respect that about you. I think that you're going to find a good balance here of a few, at least a couple wild-eyed optimists that at least speaking for myself, frankly, got pretty excited looking at your presentation. You know, I think that what we all have in common is we're rooted in reality and in the data. But when you look at the data, and perhaps that's what, you know, that's why the two of us do what we do, you have to acknowledge how it's impacting the status quo, but you look for the opportunities within that data to improve the status quo. And there was a lot in there, if you looked closely enough. And I think that to answer your question, Deputy Mayor, when you look at virtually, you know, I'm a little bit biased, virtually everything that you said that we should be doing, I believe we are doing. Now, are we doing it enough of it? Are we doing it fast enough? Are we doing it at a sufficient scale? I think all of those are valid questions, and probably, you know, if we're being honest with ourselves, the answer is no. But you know, when you look at housing, and I'm going to give the county executive some credit here. When you look at Plan Onondaga, the county's comprehensive plan, it talks about concentrating housing in existing centers, right? Of course, that certainly means Syracuse, but it's not limited to the city of Syracuse. But building in existing centers where you have existing infrastructure, existing housing stock. When you look at the Syracuse Surge Initiative, the Syracuse Surge is our strategy for inclusive growth in the new economy. It's recognizing the new economy, that things are changing, the world is evolving, and it's recognizing that we need to be able to compete in that new in those industries and in that economy. But it's also recognizing that if we want to do it effectively, we have to do it in an inclusive way that pushes back against the very real data that you saw behind us in terms of inequities in our community. So right on down the line, from housing strategy to economic strategy to workforce development strategies, what I'm excited about is that we have built all of those strategies in a way to push back against some of the negative circumstances that exist today, that take into account the circumstances that we anticipate will exist tomorrow. And I think getting back to the last point, doing it in a way where there is true alignment, not only alignment in local government, but across the public sector, the private sector. I think we as a community are more aligned than we've ever been before, and all of that makes me feel very optimistic.
Yeah, I would just add on to the alignment of leadership really matters. I think one of the things that the mayor and I did, and again, you know, throughout history, oftentimes the Maxwell School tried to have mayors and county executives on a format like this, and always couldn't make that occur. So so I think overall, the fact that we're on the stage having fun with each other is progress. But that alignment of leadership and the intentionality about a lot of the decisions that were made really gained steam early on. I think the one of the data points that really I knew the data point, but every time you see these data points makes you think, was the amount of people that use the two major centers in our community, downtown Syracuse and the University Hill, for economic opportunity every day, but then live somewhere else. And the reality is the most important decision that we've made that we forget about is the city-county sales tax sharing agreement, which clearly recognizes that the unique role that the city plays, because if you went dollar for dollar where dollars were being spent every day, certainly the city would not receive the same amount that they do in this agreement because of the unique role, right? So that was one of the big things that the mayor and I did early on in our roles to make sure that that is out of the way. The legislature, the council approved it, so that we're not fighting over money. We're investing resources where we believe they should. We had a lot of early wins, but for me, I think one of the things that really brought the community together was actually during the pandemic. And the reality when you have a 100-year public health crisis, having to work together, having to trust each other, recognizing that certain, governments do certain things, and that's hard sometimes, right? And so I thought this community did very, very well, and that from the school districts countywide to the city, to the county, to working with our university partners, our medical infrastructure, which helped get us all through that, we were really set for good things. And one of the things that Alan led off was with global trends. And we understood those global trends, and quite frankly, I was involved leading a site selection process that started with TSMC in 2019. Most of the time was with the Intel Corporation, and the story ended with Micron. But we saw those global trends and how they could benefit us if we worked together. And the to-do list that Alan put up there was essentially the site selection checklist that for Micron, Deloitte led. And basically, really quickly, how are you going to develop, recruit, and retain workforce? After you pass the site, right? Because if you don't have a site, you don't even get a conversation. The community, investing in the community, being intentional, understanding that population trends are going the wrong way. We are not having as many children. So that means that everybody who lives in this community needs to play a larger role, specifically in underrepresented communities and communities of color, rural communities, underemployed, which happen to be females in many cases, single moms. How do you remove these barriers? So these are all the things that we've been tested and challenged, having to work on things at I would say a micro scale, and now we need to take that to the macro level in a big way to meet this moment.
Professor Lovell?
Sure. I loved your presentation as well. I think a couple of things stand out in my mind. The first is I'm not new to the area, but I didn't grow up here. I'm actually from Louisiana. So I've been here about 20 years now. And I would say over the 20 years, I actually have seen incredibly positive things happening in the area from my perspective. My kids grew up here. When they come back, they're finished college. They come back and they see incredible growth in the city. So while there are definitely lots of difficult issues, demographic issues, changes in the economy, I'm actually quite optimistic as well. I think that there is incredible collaboration in this community. And the last thing I guess I would say is we expect a lot of government, particularly here. A lot of places, government is supposed to, keep the trains running and just not get in the way. Make sure a lot of, the services that are there are operating. This is a set of officials and the community, many of whom I work with regularly. It's a team, right? There's a lot of really cool stuff going on here, and I think government's doing amazing things. Government is moving. The city, the county is moving a lot of things forward. But it shouldn't just be the government, right? Business is incredibly important, and I know that they're involved a lot as well. Incredible community organizations, nonprofit organizations, they're moving it as well. There's actually, it's pretty inspiring, actually. I see a lot of teamwork here. I do recognize that there is a lot of issues coming forward, but I actually am also positive, not because of the potential problems, because I see where we were, I see where we are now, and I see sort of a commitment to moving forward.
Thank you. Alan, any response?
All I'm going to do is I'm going to second that. I think things are positive, and I'll just tell one quick small story that illustrates it. So when I came to Syracuse, first time was about 21 years ago, and I spent a bunch of time with city people and the economic development people with Kerry at home headquarters and others. But in those days, the story has nothing to do with that part. Those days, I was 21 years younger, and I was a runner. And so I remember I was in the hotel, and I asked the man at the desk, said, you know, do you have a city map? I like to go for a run in the morning. And he took out a map, he took out a pen, and he drew a line around the center of the city and said, stay inside the line, buddy. I don't think that's true now. I think you know, it's hard to pinpoint it, and since I don't live here, so I don't see things every day, there has been a change, a positive change in what you might call as the civic culture in this city. And I think that bodes well for the future.
Mayor Walsh, you mentioned Plan Onondaga in your comments, and that's that county's planning document.
I take credit for the county executive's work all the time. Mike, Ron?
I had an opportunity to be part of many focus groups around the great work that your planning department, county exec, did to put that plan together. And so one thing about us in this community is that we're so bright and look challenges right in the face and say, how are we going to address it? And one of the challenges around that plan is the county has limited control over land use outside the city of Syracuse. And I know it's a challenge, and I know you've been up to it partnering with OSIDA and other partners about how we can address it. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I think it really important thing, right? And just so everybody knows, if there's any town supervisors here, I do believe in local control, but we have a regional opportunity here. And I think if you look at the fundamentals of the plan, within each community, you can accomplish some of that. But the first thing we talk about, center-driven development. There's key centers here today where investment is happening, and can we accomplish both more commercial and residential investment in those centers? By doing that, you don't disrupt necessarily the character of existing neighborhoods. I grew up in the Strathmore neighborhood, right? The idea of putting a commercial building on Wellesley Road would not be very popular, right? So that applies true to city neighborhoods and to suburban neighborhoods. But you have business districts. You have in towns, most towns have villages, which are small cities, which have unique architecture, just like the city of Syracuse does. So there's opportunities. There's hamlets, right? There's natural resources that are underdeveloped and underutilized. Specifically, if you look at some of Alan's maps he shared, there's water, and there's big time water out in some of these towns that should be developed, and they should be neighborhoods, right? Connecting blueways, greenways with development. So what do you do, right? And so we accomplished together, because it was a bottoms-up approach for 4 years for Plan Onondaga. First countywide comprehensive plan, really 25 years. Talking about center-driven development, talking about an all-the-above housing strategy to meet the challenges we have, thinking about new ways we're going to move around the community, especially with huge infrastructure projects like 81, huge infrastructure investments that will happen outside the White Pine Business Park with Micron, right? Then looking at what makes us unique with our greenways and our blue spaces, our quality of life, like Alan was referencing, and at the same time recognizing we have a really important segment of our economy, which is the agricultural economy in our community, and we need to continue to make our own food, right? So the farmland preservation, investing in things like the regional market, investing in Onondaga Grown, these are all important things. So what we did after we have our regional plan is we played a supporting role with our planning department, with the city, with rezone, with what you all led through and what you did with your common council. In addition to that, we have now funded all of the comprehensive plans essentially to update plans in our towns and in our villages so that they can look at zoning and they can look at center-driven development and what are some opportunities and have those community conversations with their residents. And then the next thing is, though, you got to get to work, right? We got to get units online. We have affordability challenges right now for renters and for homeowners. We need more inventory in both spaces. So we have put money in at the county level with our OCHIP program, grants for new units, right? And we continue to have great projects get off the ground to get more units online. We have money there for infrastructure, right? Not your traditional sewers and roads, but when you have a development, whether you're converting an old mall into a new neighborhood, you need to take commercial infrastructure and make it residential, right? We have money there. We've talked about an aging population. Our housing stock does not meet that at all. We have seniors, and I'm not saying all seniors should move out of their homes at all. I'm saying that I have talked to many seniors that if they had real senior communities to move into with high qualities of life, they would sell their homes. They would cash out on their greatest asset, and that would create more inventory. So we have incentives to create those types of housing developments, but it's not enough right now just to put that all forward, because the current market dynamics, you have the highest interest rates in 40 years, and you have construction costs that are still at very high inflation rates, and you don't have necessarily the construction workforce here yet, or the full-time Micron employees here yet, and the supply chain employees. So you do need to incentivize. And so recently I saw Pat Hogan here, our chairman at the OSIDA. We have looked at ways to incentivize certain housing development that is very consistent with the city's pilot programs. But one of the things that we're concerned about is even and any pilot for a residential project has to pass a but-for clause. But for this incentive, the project doesn't happen, right? And we take that very seriously. But when you're asking people to invest $50 or $60 million into housing, and they start their construction, and a year later, before they can even rent out a single unit, they're getting their assessments raised by $20 or $30 million. Now all of a sudden you have a big loan to pay back, you have no income, and now you have a $200,000 or $300,000 tax bill. That's bad faith, and no national developer is going to deal with that, right? Maybe a couple local developers will. So we put forward a very small market rate incentive for market rate, incentivized senior living communities, incentivized workforce housing, and you need all the above to meet this challenge we have. And hopefully it's just a temporary challenge to get us from now to 2027, where you'll have the semiconductor industry here in full force.
Thank you. Was there anyone else that would like to add to that conversation?
Well, I just wanted to add a couple of points. One, on the housing front, I think what's really important to acknowledge is that so much of what we're talking about between the impact of 81, the impact of Micron, is a ways away. The challenges that we're facing and that we're trying to solve, whether it's through tax exemption policy or grant programs, exist today. We have a significant housing challenge, housing crisis today. And so if we want to make sure that we are creating a place where we are going to be able to retain our existing residents and put them in a position to be successful and be competitive in these new economic opportunities, we need to make sure that their needs, especially their housing needs, are being met today. So I just wanted to make that point. And I do think, when you look at the demographics in the community, when you look at the inequities, it is one thing where, I think the county executive, maybe because, he grew up in the city, but the county executive recognizes it. I think we need more folks in the community to recognize that many of the challenges that we face, whether it's homelessness, whether it's the many issues associated with poverty, are easily chalked up as, those are city issues. Those don't affect us out in the suburbs. These are society issues that have been intentionally disproportionately concentrated in the city. And I think that the sooner all of our suburban counterparts understand that and acknowledge that, the sooner we can get past those issues and build a more equitable community. So credit to the county executive and some other county leaders that have acknowledged that, but I think that we as a community, that is one way in which we can be more aligned and come more together, is acknowledging that all of these challenges are challenges that we face together holistically, and the sooner we come to that realization, the sooner we'll be prepared to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow.
I always say, and I truly believe, that if you ignore the plight of your neighbor, their plight is going to come knocking at your door. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Well, they may take my credentials away if I didn't make a little bit of a plug for some of the things we do in the university. I guess my fundamental response is incentives are incredibly important. I completely agree, whether that's some combination of tax credits or a variety of different things. Truthfully, no one really knows exactly what that should be. I think good faith is, let's do the reasonable thing. Let's do things that make a lot of sense. I would also say, then let's see if it worked. Right? Let's check. Let's constantly be rechecking. There's an evaluation component. And again, anyone who knows me is not surprised I'm saying this. There's an evaluation component. Let's innovate, and then let's see if it worked. If it didn't work, that's okay. Right. But let's adjust. Let's adjust. And so let's not wait until 2027, 2030 and say, oh, wait a minute. It could have been something we learned a lot earlier. And again, I think that's a place where the great people in the city, great people in the county thinking about this. I know the university, I know my students, we would all be interested in that. But whoever it is, it's really important that we evaluate.
The mayor always guides us, make sure it's measurable. Let's look at the data. Somebody else has tried it. Let's see what they did, And I love pilots. Yeah. Can we try something?
Pilot programs, not pilot payment in lieu of tax agreements, right?
No.
So
I love
different
both.
type.
Can I touch on pilots though, because I do
just add one. I think, realistically, whether you're for it or against it or not have you, the likelihood that the basic ground rules of land use control and zoning, they're going to stay pretty much the same for the foreseeable future. I don't see any radical transformation coming out of Albany, and that's the only place where it's going to come out of, if it does come out of anywheres. So I think the county executive's approach of incentives and kind of a combination of moral suasion plus incentives plus showing them what's possible and things like that is a good starting point. One thing I just add, and this is kind of a little bit off perhaps what people are thinking about, is the whole question. One thing, I spent quite a few years as a practicing planner, both in local government and as a consultant. And one of the things that I kept hearing when I was talking to local officials and planning boards and so forth is, well, we did this zoning or we made this change or what have you, and so it didn't come out the way we thought it was going to. It didn't come out the way we wanted it to. And a lot of that has to do with problems of expertise, problems of sort of the quality of the planning, also the quality of the design review and the standards you set up. And that's, I think, especially important in a place like Onondaga County, which has beautiful natural environment and so forth, and where a terrible development in the wrong place. Right. You're going over a hill and you're looking at this farmland, and then all of a sudden you see something and you go, oh my God. And one thing is perhaps that's another area where the county, by virtue of its ability to bring on talented people and so forth, can offer services to, and not necessarily to everybody. And this is where pilot, not the tax type of pilot, but to find maybe one or two towns or villages that are really interested in doing the right thing, and doing the right thing at a number of levels in terms of density, perhaps even in terms of some mixed income development and things like that, and saying, we will basically come in, we will advise you, we will provide the backup support in terms of planning and design, negotiating with the developers to make sure that you get the best possible deal and so forth. So what comes out of it is really first rate. Because I think it's really important for what happens in the future, whether it's in Syracuse or in any of the other towns and villages of the county, to be first rate.
And just to touch on a couple tools, right, that we have in county government. And again, from a development standpoint, the way our tax base has shifted and grown, a lot of it was not planned out well, right? And if you drive through business corridors, part of the reason why if you live out in Clay or Cicero, you complain about Route 31 or Route 11 is because those governments allowed that development to happen so poorly because it wasn't well planned. But it was chasing tax base, right? You were chasing tax base. And a lot of these communities grew out of demand for school district, right? Not thoughtful. There's a difference between the development you'll see in those communities that grew out of the demand for school district and those which are natural centers. Look at your villages like Fayetteville, Manlius, Skaneateles, Marcellus, right? There is a different level of demand for development. And so we are not bottom feeding anymore, right? We can demand more, and we should demand more from the development community. From the standpoint of the county having the ability to drive positive regional outcomes, not to usurp authority, but there's a couple things we're uniquely positioned in. One, all major transportation roads in the suburbs are essentially state-owned or county-owned. So a county-owned road, we are in charge of curb cuts, right? In the city of Syracuse, it's not that way because Mayor Alexander did not want to give County Executive Mulroy those roads, right? So that's what happened. Now, Mayor Walsh is probably like, McMahon, you should take some and pay for them. So but in the towns, that wasn't the case, right? And so if you look at a town like Cicero, for example, where I live, every major road there is really a county road. So our transportation department absolutely has a lot to say of how that's developed. In addition to that, we control wastewater, hard stop. And so that's something that, we have said we are not going to just expand sewers just as an exercise of sprawl. We believe that within our existing infrastructure, and that's countywide, we can grow, and we can grow substantially in population. And the data shows that. So those are other key components that even if you have a local control issue with another town, they want to go do something, but they need sewers. The answer is the only time we've been willing to put more sewers in since I've been county executive is when you're bringing me jobs, not new residential housing.
We are approaching close to 10 minutes left, but I cannot let this panel get away without a couple of the data points on here. Really stark is if the projections are true, decrease in children, increase in elderly population, the middle section, which is primarily the workforce of this community, small increment increases, and then the other was climate. And without question, I can't remember what presentation, but the image that has been burned into my memory is the trajectory of climate effects on the United States, from brown to green. And much of this country was some form of brown. And the green patches were right here where we are. So our climate, our environment, our need to protect our environment and maintain all of our waterways, our green spaces. So I really wanted the panel to take either one of those, really, as we go into the future, thinking about climate or thinking about this real interesting population trend that we just saw.
So I'll take this real quick, and then because it was a slide we showed every semiconductor company, is that we are actually probably the most climate resilient community in the whole, all of North America. We don't have earthquakes, essentially. Let's knock on wood for all this, by the way. We don't get hurricanes, tornadoes. We get snow. We know how to plow it. And so when we were talking to Intel and we were talking to Micron, we could show that. And why I'm very bullish on the future is the same reasons why we won the Micron project for companies that make things and make technology that's going to matter and drive things like AI and 5G moving forward for technology. Those same fundamentals exist even after Micron's here. We have water. We're going to have wastewater capacity because we're going to invest in that infrastructure. We have land, and we're going to be thoughtful in planning, and we're going to develop more sites. So the fundamentals are there to continue, to Alan's point, to compete. And we recognize we're going to have to compete. But the one thing that, even though those fundamentals are there, that we will have to do really, really well is workforce and investing in our own people, specifically in underinvested communities.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I leaned over to the county executive when we were going through the global trends, and I said, for once, I feel like some of these trends are working in our favor. And and you pointed out that in terms of isolationism, onshoring, that is why we had the opportunity that we had with Micron. And with climate change, is damaging as it is to the globe at large, it does present us with some opportunities here locally, and I think that we need to do our best to take advantage of them. Demographically, again, I think it speaks to the importance, as the county executive said, to our workforce development initiatives, and that's why I'm heartened when you look at where we're investing in workforce. It's at every level. I don't think there are many communities where that one of the largest economic development projects is building a new regional STEAM high school. But we're doing that because we recognize that our young people are going to need those skills to be competitive in the new economy. But again, when you look at all of our other workforce development partners, our educational medical institutions, you're seeing them evolve and iterate in ways that are more accessible to older populations. You see partners like the SUNY Educational Opportunity Center, which is our go-to partner for adult workforce development, that are teaching the foundational skills necessary to be competitive in these jobs. And these are for individuals oftentimes that had a career and that are looking to start a new career. And so, when I see those demographic shifts and I see those, the older populations, I see significant opportunities there, again, to make sure that the folks that have been here throughout the difficult times are the first ones that stand to benefit from these new investments. And again, I think we're on the right track. The challenge is accelerate and scale.
I'll add just very briefly. By the way, Alan, I thought at some point you might be a demographer with all of the population statistics you were throwing up there, which is really great to see. I think that's crucial to consider all of the sort of demographic conditions. The natural resources is essential. That is a comparative advantage that we have that we're clearly taking advantage of. I completely agree that will only become more beneficial over time. The other thing that I would say is population growth is great, but it's also not essential. I think that there were groups that Alan pointed out that are really important to have a community, whether it's the city or the county, thrive. And attracting those individuals, even if we don't grow, is fine. You just want to think about the composition of your population and make sure that while we're taking care of everyone, our current residents, but that we are bringing in young people, highly educated people, and we're keeping them.
Yeah. See, quality is not quantity. And really making the workforce system work for everybody. And the more somebody has deficits and problems that are keeping that person from succeeding in the workforce, the more the workforce system has to be able to provide not just the job training, but all the empowerment and dealing with legal disabilities, dealing with everything else that the person needs to get on the way. Because as in the long run, the workforce, the so-called working age population, will shrink. But making sure that everybody in that population who wants to work, who is capable of working, can achieve their full potential as a person is, I think, the critical task. So it doesn't matter whether you're growing or not. If you grow, that's fine. If you don't grow, that's fine. The question is, what is the quality of the human capital in the community and the quality of life that the community offers?
Okay. Syracuse, Onondaga County, Central New York family, don't make me regret this. We're going to take a couple questions. Make your question a question and make it quick. Thank you, sir.
You guys hear me all right? Yeah. All right, great. I'm glad I want to commend both of you for Plan Onondaga, Food Plan CNY, and since we're talking about rezone Syracuse, the one question, or rather, what I'm going to implore you both, and since we're all planners up here, is the overlay district. I feel that urban agriculture, by the way, NRCS is raining money from heaven for urban ag. It's the new hot thing, right? If we could somehow provide a mechanism for urban agriculture, and I'm not meaning community gardens, I'm not meaning Brady, I'm not meaning Jubilee, I mean like actual entrepreneurship and innovation, because now there's things like indoor, containership growing, there's vertical growing, there's hydroponics, there's rooftop growing. I think if we could provide a framework for urban producers, we might be able to address some of those corridors where we have entrenched poverty, as well as some of the health issues that are associated with that entrenched poverty, as well as innovation, workforce, job creation, entrepreneurship. But a lot of planners, I don't think, are familiar with this idea of a district overlay that could be specifically tailored towards ag. And by the way, no cities of our size have done it in the country yet.
Consider the seed planted.
Yes. Yes.
Good evening, panel. Most of you know me. My name is Phil Turner. I'm pastor of Bethany Baptist Church on the east side of the city. And I think that there is something that we need to talk about that's critical. And I thank you, Mr. Mallach, for coming to our community and helping us understand the importance of intentionality. Because the condition that we lived in was engineered with intentionality. Pockets of poverty, limited resources, and absence of development. And so the flight to suburbia started somewhere around 60 or 70 years ago. Along with that flight went development, resources, okay? The great migration of African-American people, migrant working people, started somewhere around 1920, lasted up until 1970. But it was assumed that those people wanted to live in pockets of poverty in urban communities when most of those people were coming from agricultural backgrounds. And the pockets of poverty that were developed, it's important to say that that happened under the false premise that people in those pockets were less ambitious, less intelligent, less able to take advantage of opportunities. So if we're going to, and Mayor, I know you said this, I'm just doubling down on it, but I think that if we don't change our ideology, that we don't change the motif under which this developed, then we are doomed to not be able to increase or improve the quality of living across ethnic lines, because we have some ethnic issues here that we're not talking about. And if we don't change that, then we're doomed to repeat what we have already developed.
Thank you, sir. I see 3 people at the mic.
You wanted a question. The question is, the question is.
All right, Pastor.
I promise not to preach, maybe I already have. But I think that the question is are we willing to press a need for change as intentionally as we intentionally created the condition that we live in now? And is the community, I know that you up here who are leaders, who are well aware of how this stuff developed, okay, you might be a little bit more willing than to accept the need for change than your constituents. But unless we can do that, and unless we can remain committed to that, then we're doomed to repeat what we have now.
Thank you, sir. I see 3 people at the mic. I see 1 more person coming to the mic, and then we're going to be done for the evening. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Rizzo. I'm with On Point for College, and we're in the business of creating the workforce that you guys are looking for, and particularly the demographic that you said we have this much of, but it could grow, and there's lots of potential. And to the pastor's point, a whole lot of those people that we're working with are young people coming out of poverty, and young people who happen to be of color, and young people who are new Americans. And I am very, very sorry to tell you that they don't stay here after they complete their internship with the city or with the county, after they finish getting their education at SU, because we're missing something critical. They're going someplace else to raise their families, to create communities for people of their age group, to feel comfortable together, to find work, to make space for themselves. Here's the question. I don't see any of those people in this room. I was stopped twice by the police trying to get in here, and I'm white. We're unintentionally, absolutely unintentionally, because now we're aware of all the things the pastor told us, creating circumstances where we're not listening to the people we need to listen to. And I'd love to hear what the plan is to listen to them so that they can tell us what they need so that they will stay and be part of our future.
Yeah, so I guess I'll try to answer the question. I understand and appreciate everything you said. I don't disagree with most of it. I will say, that's painting with a pretty broad brush that we're not listening. I've spent time engaging with on-point students, bringing on-point students in as interns, and I know this isn't just about on-point. We're talking about race. We're talking about class and a lot of things that are uncomfortable to talk about. So what I would say is we do our best to engage with, not only engage with, but to lift up unapologetically the most marginalized among us, people of color, women, veterans. When you look at our programs that we're supporting, all of them prioritize the most marginalized among us. However, if you or anyone else in here feels like there is a constituency or a group that is not being effectively engaged, let us know and we'll show up. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just reiterate, one, we're a huge funder of your organization, as you're aware of. So we love the work you all do. But two, I think from the pastor's point, you need to be intentional, and you need to do things, and you need to show leadership. And how we can best do that is through our own organizations, right? If you look at the way we give out contracts with exceeding MWBE goals, with our own diversity requirement, we've far exceeded the percentages of minorities in countywide in our hiring in our own organization and county government, continuing to fund in areas that traditionally counties that we just traditionally don't fund in, right? Housing isn't something that, to the panel's point, we have an active role in, but we see the issues and we're funding millions and millions of dollars. And what we need to do, Pastor, is the leaders that are here need to continue to lead and others will follow. And I think what we've seen at the county legislature dominated by suburban legislators is that when I put forward something that is investing in our urban core, even though those aren't their constituents, they're voting yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So one of the statistics we saw earlier was that approximately, I think it was 76% of the city's housing stock is vacant for 90 days or more. How do you reconcile that essentially dead space with the call for new development in what is already our green space? How do we maintain those green spaces and those blue spaces while reallocating what is not being used today?
In the city, we have amazing assets. Our parks are amazing. I know our commissioner is right there doing amazing work. We're working very hard with CZB now to talk about how we begin to prioritize redevelopment in communities that have struggled and need investment, and those neighborhoods that we do not want to trend in the wrong direction. And so we should be prioritizing in those communities, but building upon the assets that we have in the city. And despite some people's opinions, there are plenty of assets in the city of Syracuse.
So, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, just one thing. I think, vacant properties, most of the vacant, abandoned, boarded up properties in the county are in the city. And there's still an awful lot of them. I think there are fewer than there were 5-10 years ago, but there's still an awful lot of them. And I think the question is how to see them as an opportunity. And what that means would vary depending on the property. In some cases, whether it can be rehabilitated and become somebody's home, but that's expensive because, if you fix it up, the house is going to be worth less than it's going to cost to fix up, so you need public money for that, and you can only do so much of that. In other cases, the city has demolished a lot of vacant properties. The catch there is, once you've demolished a vacant property, you've got a vacant lot. And unless you can think of some way to make that vacant lot, at a minimum, non-harmful and preferably a plus, you might find yourself with a problem, just a slightly different problem than what you started out with, but still a problem. But so I think the land bank is doing good work. I think there's a lot of positive motion, but it really requires almost like a building by building strategy, and to recognize also that until the market in Syracuse improves to the point where every property is seen as having value, the city will still have this steady drip of people walking away from properties. So in the long run, building the market is as important as figuring out how to deal with the individual properties.
So I know we're probably running out of time, but I gotta add a few more things. So I'm glad Alan acknowledged that our vacant properties have declined. They've declined about 38% in the past 6 years. Nice to see you, Amanda, by the way. It's been a while. Former member of our team in city government. So I wanted to mention that. Also, where those vacant lots are existing, where it's appropriate, we're building new housing. We're gonna build about 40 new either single or two-family homes in those vacant lots just this year alone. To the gentleman's point over here, some of that may be more appropriately urban agriculture space, and so that gets to land use. So I think we're doing the right things. I think we're obviously underway with a housing strategy right now. County is doing a housing study as well. Much of that is, I think, kind of really honing in on what we would describe as our bridge neighborhoods or our transitional neighborhoods that are on the periphery of our strongest neighborhoods, where with intentional investments we can begin to shore up some of those neighborhoods and build back that market to a point where it can be more self-sustaining. So again, I think we're doing many of the right things, but we've got to do a lot more of it.
Just from a macro level, a unit's a unit to us. We actually give preference when we're giving out incentives to adaptive reuse. So many of the awards that we've given out are projects that are within the city, renovating, homes, renovating 4 units, 6 units, and whatnot. So, we're incentivizing more towards the adaptive reuse side than we are towards greenfield development.
Thank you.
We are past time, but we have 2 more. I'm not going to do that to you. We have 2 more questions.
Hi, my name's Andrea Jacobs. I'm from Interfaith Works, a nonprofit that works in the schools. And I wanted to uplift, you said education once that was not in the realm of Syracuse University. And I wanted to uplift the role of our schools in this whole conversation of housing and job market. I'm one of the demographics. If I live outside the city, I work in the city. If you're talking about young families, the first question is, where are kids going to go to school? We know that our schools in Syracuse are so segregated. They are so segregated. All this data is exactly the same in our schools, and our schools are obviously funded very differently. So my question is to Alan, have you seen places where the partnership between the education system and the government and the nonprofits, that they're working together in a positive way to have that be a part of the conversation? And to the mayor and county exec, I know the STEAM school is an easy answer. I think it's a great project, but what more than the STEAM school are we considering as we're talking about jobs and families and housing?
I'll probably make some enemies in the room when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I have seen some amazing partnerships in a number of communities around the country which have focused on taking kids from the toughest backgrounds and getting them to the point where they basically had the entire world of opportunity before them. They could get into good colleges, they could get into good jobs, and so forth. All of the examples I was able to find are charter schools, nonprofit charter schools, in many cases community-based, sometimes on a larger scale, because I think public schools today have an extraordinarily difficult task before them. And I think, and also for a lot of reasons which are very complicated, it's become extraordinarily difficult for public schools to innovate in a meaningful sense. And I think there's some evidence in some school districts that where charter schools have actually succeeded in making a change, it's kind of pulled public schools along with them. It's basically, this may seem crazy, but it's a kind of a positive competition that actually can have positive results. So I think the critical thing is to create room for experiment, room for innovation, and to look at what some of the successful models, whether in Boston or Atlanta or wherever, have actually been able to accomplish. Not copy them literally, but learn from them. And I think I would love to see the change happen in the public school system, but I'm not wildly optimistic about them, in the sense, being able to get out of their own way. But I think you got to try.
So I'll just offer real quick. Want to lift up in our city public school district career and technical education programs. We have phenomenal CTE programs that our local employers are fully invested in, excited about, and we are looking to continue to grow those.
Yeah, just from a macro level, but we look at all poverty-driven causes and things that we need to make investments in with short, mid, and long-term strategies. When it comes to education, the one we believe most in is early childhood, kindergarten readiness. Reality is if a kid's not kindergarten ready, they're not going to pass a fourth grade proficiency exam, which means they're highly likely not going to graduate high school. I just did a pilot for 2 years on generational poverty with single moms. I can tell you out of that pilot program where we are removing almost every barrier to employment for these individuals and helping these individuals work. The ones without a high school degree are having a almost extremely difficult time maintaining employment, right? So it's education. We know that kindergarten readiness and early childhood investments, we've made historic investments there, and we'll continue to do that.
Just one quick additional point. I think whether it's public schools, charter schools, whomever, I think this focus on technical education and so forth is a great starting point, because college is important, and it's important for an awful lot of people. But what we've done in many respects in our school systems is we've created a two-tier system where if you're going to go to college, you get focused on. If you're not, you're kind of seen as a second-class citizen. And this has been accumulating for decades and decades. And we've got to break out of this mold. We've got to go back to the notion that schools should provide a path to opportunity for everyone, and college is not the only path to opportunity. And that means building up the technical education, building up the vocational education, creating relationships with employers, creating apprenticeship programs. Schools have got to become like almost sort of wraparound centers for creating opportunity for young people. And that requires, I think, a very different way of thinking about what being a public school system or any kind of school system is.
Thank you.
Our final question.
Good evening. My name is Bernard Alex, and who am I today? Town of DeWitt board member. The first in 188 years, African American elected in the town of DeWitt. Should we applaud that? I don't know. But my question is, which I appreciate hearing the county executive and the mayor say, and the point that was shared so well, build the regional quality of life. I see that 81 and what was done, as was said by my colleague, and the intentionality of creating these poverty barriers is not just in the city. The same thing in regionally and in suburbia exists. To build homes, spaces, and I say this for my question, where people can live with mixed income so that we do not create again the have and the have-nots. There is a need, even in the town of DeWitt, to have city center, a locational place. Our people, our young people who come, even in DeWitt, have said to me, I can't wait to get out. Particularly those of color can't wait to get out because they don't feel a sense of connectivity. What is going to be done, as he said, we are a med ed community. How are we going to take that into our suburban areas as well as these regional centers so that we have options, inclusion, and intentional efforts to build community?
Well, I think the diversification of the economy is critical. I think when nothing against our meds and eds, they've been the backbone and they've gotten us through some dark times economically. But when we're relying on industry that requires 4-year, 6-year degrees, that's not necessarily the healthiest, right? We made things in this community for a long, long time. And we've always educated kids pretty well. And I think when you look at some of the demographics that were showed today, some of the drain we've had is we educated these kids and they left because there was an economic opportunity or maybe a feeling of place in some instances. So I think diversifying the economy is what we've really spent a lot of time doing. And intentionally, when it comes to tech, we know tech is not traditionally inclusive, and with communities of color and with females. And so there's an intentionality of that. We actually won a grant from J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the first things we all worked on together, recognizing that we need to be inclusive in tech. And so we've done a pretty good job of bringing in companies that are making the technology that's going to be relevant for the next 20 and 30 years at least. We've done a really good job of continuing to make sure that the companies that have been here, our legacy manufacturers like Lockheed Martin and Saab and TTM and SRC are thriving. What we need to do a better job, and we're making the investments, is making sure that the workforce is inclusive. And the STEAM school was brought up, but we're making historic investments at OCC related to developing technicians, making investments at the Tech Garden to help create that ecosystem. There's going to be more and more announcements about workforce development infrastructure that's happening. But that's having a diverse economy is going to require having everybody in the game, or else we won't get the supply chain companies to come co-locate here. That's the reality. And if we don't do that, 10 years from now, I'll say this wasn't a successful moment in time for us all.
Professor Lobo, County Executive McMahon, Mayor Walsh, Alan, thank you. Thank you all.
So thank you, everyone. We are thrilled you were here for a very important, informative, and critical discussion this evening. Would like to thank Alan Mallach for joining us, our elected leaders, Mayor Walsh, County Executive McMahon, and Deputy Mayor Owens, and Professor Lopo, my colleague. Most of all, we thank you for joining us this evening and hope this goes on, this discussion, and we continue to all move forward. Thank you all and have a safe trip home.